Hi folks, welcome back to Aeon Pro. Today, we're talking about This Week in Review. Now this is the inaugural episode of what I hope to be a weekly news report show where we talk about the biggest tech stories and gaming stories of the past week. The 2019 Consumer Electronics Show took place last week, and there were a large number of announcements and products being displayed at the show this year. So many that we can't actually discuss all of them right now. We did discuss quite a few of them on a Wednesday episode of a brief CES so far. If you haven't seen that already, link in the description below and we'll try and leave a card up in the corner there for you. Some of the biggest stories that came from CES this year were a couple of new graphics cards in Nvidia's RTX 2060, as well as AMD's Radeon 7 or V2. It's essentially a Vega 2 graphics card, but they're calling it the Radeon 7. Now, we went over both of these cards in that episode, as I mentioned, but just a brief rundown. The RTX 2060 is coming out for $350 with comparable performance to a GTX 1070 or 1070 Ti. The Radeon 7 is going to be coming out for $700, and they're comparing that to an RTX 2080 just without the ray tracing. We went into that in great detail in that episode, so I'm not going to go over it now, but we are looking forward to the launches of both of these cards later on this year, the first being this month, and that's going to be the RTX 2060, and the Radeon 7 will be coming out in February. Now, one aspect pertaining to these graphics cards that we didn't talk about on Wednesday because it hadn't happened yet was a story about Nvidia's Jensen Wang talking pretty big words about the Radeon 7 and how it matched up to the RTX cards. He said some things that I'm not going to repeat because I don't feel like I need to give breath to that sort of thing. But essentially he was talking trash and trying to say that the Radeon card has absolutely no way to match up to the RTX cards. And Dr. Lisa Su, who responded rather amicably, basically said, I'm not playing that game. We're here to make sure our cards are the best that we can make them. We're not interested in, getting into the politics behind all that. I am still planning on making a video comparing the two keynotes, and I think I will bring up this exchange as well during that video because it outlines and directly relates to a lot of the things that I want to say about how Nvidia's Jensen Huang handles presentation and how he represents their company. So look forward to that video later this week, and hopefully we'll get that up soon. Probably the next biggest story out of this year's CES was the fact that Nvidia announced they're going to be supporting and certifying certain async monitors as G-Sync compatible. Now, what this means is that if you have an Nvidia supported graphics card, such as the GTX 1060 or the RTX 2080, any card that has the capability of activating Nvidia's G-Sync software is going to be compatible with these certified async monitors. This is a big deal because a lot of the G-Sync certified monitors are very expensive, whereas the adaptive sync or async monitors tend to be a lot cheaper. We're looking forward to more as this story unfolds. As of right now, there are only 12 certified monitors, according to Nvidia, that count as these G-Sync certified monitors. We'll have to see going forward what that does for the market and if that's going to lower the prices of the now G-Sync Ultimate monitors, or if we're going to see those kind of maintaining the same price structure that they've had, and these adaptive sync monitors maintaining their price structure. So you have a little bit of a separation between what they're calling the Ultimate and what will kind of just work, if you'll pardon the meme. The next biggest story out of this year's CES, as far as I'm concerned, is EVGA's announcement of their new audio sound card. Now, they're calling this an audio card instead of a sound card, which I think is sort of a fallacy. They're trying to say that there's more to audio than just sound, and I think you're kind of splitting hairs at that point. But they are essentially releasing a card to compete with Creative and their licensed, RX brand and Audigy and all of those, Sound Blaster, that kind of thing. A little more information has come out of this in the past week. Looks like it's going to be priced somewhere in the $200 range, which is unfortunate news for me because it means that I'm not necessarily going to be able to do a review and comparison with this card right at launch. I'm going to be trying to save up so that I can end up getting that card maybe next month, and we'll do a compare and contrast between that and the sound card on Black Ice over here. But Creative also announced their own new card, and I'm looking forward to maybe picking up both and doing a head-to-head. It is a little difficult to do sound comparisons on video over YouTube and something like this, especially when you're kind of just relating on other people's sound drivers and sound cards to play back the sound that you're comparing. But we'll try and figure something out and see if we can come up with something that's going to work. Probably the biggest story in gaming over the past week was the announcement that Activision and Bungie were going to be going their separate ways. Now, it looks like Bungie is trying to separate themselves from Activision. They have split from companies before. They were originally partnered with Microsoft, and they split that agreement as well. There's no word yet on what this means as far as the Destiny series is concerned. It has been the biggest thing that Bungie has been working on since they lost the rights to Halo a couple years back. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens going forward. We don't know if this split is going to be in favor of Bungie or in favor of Activision. And by that I mean a lot of the complaints that people had with Destiny and Destiny 2 had to do with things like microtransactions, a very large number of DLC that came out after the game was released, things that people kind of complain about all the time these days anyway, and rightly so. I don't mean to sound jaded in that regard, because there is some legitimate complaints there and things that I think the gaming industry needs to pay attention to, but there's no word yet on what this means for Bungie. A lot of fans are hoping it means less microtransactions, a lot more resources being spent towards making a good game rather than making something that's going to make money. However, because these things are sort of major facets of the gaming industry these days, I think it may be a little bit of a stretch to believe that they're going to completely get rid of microtransactions, but I think the hope is that ultimately things like the Eververse shop are going to be removed from the game. These were items that you could purchase which would essentially break the game, allowing players to get higher level weapons or items that you could use in-game that greatly waived matches and gameplay into your favor, and it was essentially becoming a pay-to-win sort of system, which is something that a lot of gamers have had a problem with for a very long time. So hopefully the Eververse will go away. I don't think we'll completely see the ending of microtransactions in the Destiny series, but I'm hoping that things like Eververse kind of take a back seat, and this split from Activision, who was pushing for more and more microtransactions as Destiny 2 ran, hopefully this separation will allow Bungie to get back to focusing on the game and not worrying so much about coming up with ways to make more microtransactions. I think that was a detriment to the game series, so I'm looking forward to seeing that go away in Destiny 3. We'll have to keep our eyes peeled and see what happens going forward, but I think it's okay to be a little hopeful. I just wouldn't get your hopes up completely, because I think microtransactions are a part of gaming that are probably not going to disappear anytime soon. The last thing we're going to talk about is a little bit of speculation at this point. I haven't had the opportunity to find and verify these sources, but it does look like we've finally gotten an announcement for pricing of those F and KF SKUs from Intel that I talked about on Wednesday's episode. It's kind of unclear right now why this is the case, but it looks like all of these new chips are going to be priced essentially the same as the chips that come already. So your 9900KF is so far listed at the same price as the 9900K. This is despite the fact that the new SKU does not contain an iGPU or an integrated graphics processor in the chip itself. What that means is that in order to utilize these chips with, say, a gaming system, you do still need to have a dedicated graphics card. Now, granted, if you're buying a 9900K, you probably have a dedicated graphics card anyway, but it's a little unclear as to why these cards cost the same. Their TDP is exactly the same, they all maintain the same base and boost frequencies, they have the same core and thread count, and they even have the same memory amount and memory cache amount. So it's a little interesting that Intel seems to be wanting to keep these prices the same. Now again, I cannot attest to the 100% legitimacy of these rumors. It is something I'm going to be looking into and following up on later if this is true, so definitely watch my Twitter because I will be talking about this some more as the days progress. Hopefully Intel will be announcing that this is either false or we'll get some kind of explanation as to why this is the case. I personally can't believe that they would even release these at the same price. Paying $490 for a CPU that has an integrated graphics processor, while still somewhat outlandish in my mind, at least would make sense if you then offered that chip without the iGPU at a lower cost. So if they're releasing these at the same price, I think this is a huge mistake, and I think Intel would be shooting themselves in the foot if they actually did this. So I will be following up on this story later on. I'm hoping that this isn't the case because it's just bad. It's really bad form, especially with AMD's Ryzen 3 around the corner. If this is something Intel is actually doing, I think Ryzen or AMD has a chance to significantly kick them in the shins this year, and they're already leading in stocks anyway, so it would be a little bit surprising to me that Intel would do something like this. That's going to do it for this week in review. If you think we've missed any major stories or there's something that you wanted us to talk about that we didn't, feel free to leave a message in the comments letting us know. We'd be more than happy to engage with you guys and come up with some more stories, deliver some more interesting information on things that you guys are interested in hearing about. As always, this has been Mark with Aeon Pro, and we'll see you guys next week. Probably the next biggest story to come out of CES this past week was the story that Nvidia has announced